The Huntington welcomes you to Dreaming with Designers, featuring ML Geiger in conversation with Rosalind Bevan. All events at the Huntington include a land acknowledgement. The Huntington acknowledges that our physical spaces stand on the occupied homeland of the Massachusetts people. We begin by acknowledging the Massachusetts tribe, from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We pay respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit the land to this day. We honor and respect the many Native peoples who are connected to this land, past, present, and future, including the Nipmuc and Wampanoag peoples. And now, Dreaming with Designers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosalind Bevan. I'm the casting and producing associate here at the Huntington, and I'm here with Mary Louise Geiger, the lighting designer of Our Daughters Like Pillars. Hey, Amel, thanks for being here.
Hey, Roz, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about this show. It's been a long time coming. You've been with us for
understatement of the decade.
Right. You've been with us for a while on this. And I wanted to just start by talking about like when designers come into the process, because I think not a lot of people understand that designers are actually like one of the first pieces, and they're integrated like the earliest. And can you talk about what that early process looks like? One, when you're given a script, but also a brand new play like Our Daughters Like Pillars. What's your beginning process?
Well, first, we're all going to have a bunch of meetings talking about the play and what does it mean? What do we want to say about it? What do we think the context is in which we're presenting it? You know, doesn't pertain to this play, but there's a version of, say The Visit, which, we want to produce it. We want to do it as if we're in Grand Central Station. So what is that? What are all the choices that arise around that? And in the case of Our Daughters Like Pillars, it was several revisions ago in 2020, but we all get together and talk about the play and what we think is going on. What does it mean? Is it a realistic play? Is it not a realistic play? How does all of that work? What's tricky about this play is that it's set both in a backyard and within a vacation home, and the stage is not really that big. So you have to go into these rooms plus hang around in the backyard and be able to, enter a tiny house. And at that point, I think the tiny house opened up. So we had to be able to go inside the tiny house. So there were a little bit filmic transitions or ideas based in the play that we were trying to figure out, how are we going to do all of these things and still be able to see everything. So the question is, how can you present both the backyard and the interior of the house or houses and still see all of that? So how do we change scenes? It's also not a particularly short play. So we want to be able to figure out how to do things efficiently, and it takes place over not very much time. It's really over, about 48 hours maybe, right? So, there's not there's some internal monologues which have come into play much more as this version of it developed than existed in the first version, I think.
Yeah. And they've moved around too. So what was your first, all of those things are going through your mind when you're reading it. What was your first impression of the story and this family?
Well, I am the oldest of four. The hilarious part is that there's a ton of oldest children all working on this play.
I know everyone always asks when a new collaborator comes in, like, which one are you of your siblings?
Yeah, right, exactly. So I'm the oldest of four, and I think my sister, who lives in Stowe, Mass, and thus was able to see the show last Friday, which was great, is second. So it's my sister, me, and then our two brothers, and we a little bit trade off the kind of Lavinia, Octavia roles, and then our youngest brother could not be more Zelda.
Oh, amazing. So you saw your family in this play.
Oh my God, completely. Yeah. Yes. And we also have a complicated stepmother. So it's been, our parents divorced when I was 23, I guess, or 22. And so it was 22, 20, 18, 16, because we
Oh,
were
wow.
roughly every 2 years. So it was really harder on my brothers because they were the ones still at home. And I had just finished college. So I was my first year out of school. And my sister was just graduating or something like that. It was somewhere, maybe she was 21. So,
Yeah.
something like that. But
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you
there's,
this one example of my brother that will completely tell you how he's exactly like Zelda.
oh, please
So
do.
he had left his little toy or something, or bear or dog or whatever it was, whatever his favorite stuffed toy was, on the stairs. So my mother is going to bed. She picks up the stuffed toy. She goes in their room. She puts the stuffed toy on his bed, kisses him on the forehead. And as she's closing the door, she hears my brother, my youngest brother, say, "Hey, Bill, Mom gave me a mint." So he likes to torture all of us.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's like, who does mom love the most?
Oh my
Who's
God,
the
yeah.
favorite, right?
Exactly. Who's the
That-
favorite today?
Who's the favorite today? That's so funny. That's, yeah, I see my families in, I'm one of three sisters, and I see my family all over this play, and I always tell Kirsten, I never miss an opportunity to tell Kirsten as well. So I love that we all can relate. So you were talking about how this play happens over a couple of days, and we're in this vacation home, and a lot of people, I think also too, and I noticed this too in the plays that I see, like lighting is like so essential, but you're almost to the point where it's like you don't even know it's happening, or you don't even know it's there. And I wanted to get your take on how did you go about building, and like you said, it's a long play, building the passage of time, building the timeline of this play, and kind of adjusting us into the moment and the time.
Well, I'll back up a little bit and just say lighting has basically 5 or 6 functions that we have to provide, right? Which is visibility, plausibility, or helping set the given circumstances, which in this case is like inside, outside, time of day, stuff like that. Mood, and the mood changes throughout the play. So you sometimes want to have a like pretty cozy night, and sometimes you want to have a threatening, yucky night. Sometimes you want to have a icky, there's a weird conversation at the top of Act 2 with Missy, with their stepmother, about the house, and the girls are peeved, and it's early-ish morning. So how do you set that up so that there can be a feeling, the right kind of emotion around the table, and still see them, etc. Composing the stage picture, which is I tell the audience where to look, basically. Kind of supporting the theme of the play and supporting the style of the play, right? So, and we have these these qualities of light to do it. Is the light sharp? Is the light soft? What color is it? How bright is it? How dim is it? And we have to be able to hear all of this talking. And part of the way we hear is to see people's mouths. So that's part of why this mask thing has been so hard, I think, because you can't, beyond the ability to project past the mask, you can't see people's mouths, so you can't always track what's going on, right? Beyond, you can't see them smiling or their facial expression. You can't track it in their vocal quality either, or sort of see what they're saying. So I try to set up, I have to decide stuff like, where is afternoon light coming from in Act 1? And if it's coming from there, then the morning has to come from the opposite side, right? Because the sun here on Earth rises in the east and sets in the west.
In our reality.
We're a little bit north. So the northern twilight is pretty long. And even we're on the eastern end of the time. I grew up in Michigan, which is on the western end of the Eastern time zone. And this is the eastern end of the time zone. And there's actually an hour difference between sunset in the east and the west of the time zone. So I was thinking hard about all of that. What time are these things happening? And so when does it get dark? So when after dinner, they go take the trash out to the garbage cans, what's the quality of light by then? Do we have they figured out the exterior lighting in the place? I think we decided that got better at it as the play went on. So the first night they had turned on the kind of uplights on the trees that came with the house, but they hadn't figured out that there were some lanterns or something that they could put outside. So we could change the vibe in Act 3 a little bit. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I'm so fascinated because it's these kinds of things that you as a designer are thinking in such detail so that it feels so real to me watching and so natural to me watching. And that's what's like really cool about it. And I love that sort of, I don't think I heard you both say that about like how they figure out the lighting. And it is the sort of that they do sort of feel like they're in this vacation home the first day, night, and then they sort of, it's like the next day you're actually comfortable in your vacation home or hotel, like once you've slept there and had food and figured it out. And that's so apparent. Like I didn't hear you talk about it, but that's really, really clear now that you're saying it.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I love that. And all of those elements. And so on the topic of like mood and moments where we aren't in here on earth in a way, where you have those moments where we're looking at the like internal thoughts of the characters and we're sort of popped out of the present moment and dive into their minds, and their voices get a little more amplified. They're making eye contact with the audience. Lighting and sound play a huge role in transporting us in those moments. And I wanted to know how you went about creating those moments. There's lots of color, there's lots of isolation of character, and they're all a bit different too. So I wanted to know how those came about.
Well, let's hold on for 1 second, because one thing I wanted to say about, we literally shut down the day of the designer run. Right. And as it turned out, I had COVID. So it's good I stayed home, but my assistant was going to come and focus. And I thought I just had a bad cold. Right. So he was about to get on the train and go focus. But so what happened is we had a light plot that was in the air. Right.
Right.
So, and no one was going to pay for any of us to redesign the show 2 years later. So we had the show and a trailer and we just put it all in. Right. So I'm looking at it during the focus and I'm like, what was my thought about this nighttime color? Because it is barely cool. And, daytime, like natural light again, on Earth is colorful periodically, but for the most part, it's like tones of white light, right? So it's warmer in the morning. It's kind of bright and could be kind of cold. Like today, we're having a sort of soft gray day. The light's cool. The shadows are not very sharp. You can see behind both of us, we have sort of soft shadows, and I'm facing a window, so you can see it come in. But the nighttime stuff, night is not really blue. It is a cliche about how we make night on stage or in film or anything, but you still want it to be sort of cool so that it can recede, you know what I mean? And the people, you can find a way to etch the people out in that. So I did have to change all of the night color because at some point Kimberly is like, this kind of looks like day and it's really night here. And I'm like, yeah, I see that. And I have made an error in a big bunch of lights. And so we're going to have to change it the next day. So there's that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the version we started rehearsal with had only one direct address, which was Octavia in Act 3.
Right.
So, and I read this play with my students. I teach at NYU, and I read this play with my graduate students because we read a play a week and discuss them. And if we're working on stuff, we tend to have them read it so that we can bring our work back to them. And the students were like, how come there's only one of those? And I thought, yeah, I wonder. So of course, by the time we get to actually teching the show, there's now like everybody has one.
Everyone had that question, that same question.
Exactly. So clearly it had come up. And so at first, we want to be able to pull that moment out of whatever is going on so that we can kind of enter into the character's mind, right? So at first I thought, okay, well, I have a light that can focus down on people and can be anywhere. It's called an IQ, which is a movable mirror. So it means it's very quiet and it can function like a moving light because you can just place the light anywhere because the mirror can bounce the light onto the person. And it also has an iris, so we could make it tight on people. So the beginning, at first, that moment with Yvonne at the very top of the play was not, well, I'm going to call it a jump, which is what we ended up calling them, which is sort of their shift. But there's a jump sound, and so that was our shorthand. So the first Yvonne's thing was not a jump, but there is this moment with Octavia where she sort of pulls out. So what we did first was just pull down to her and then expand back, then restore the lights. And that was a little bit of a placeholder because we were thinking, oh, I'm not entirely sure what to do with, or I was thinking anyway, I'm not entirely sure what to do with all of these things. And we had a pretty short tech period. So we have to get the play in the light board, or get through the play once. And then we really figure out what we're doing by the time we get to the end, right? So as we're progressing through, we talked about it, and Kimberly's like, I'm not sure that's it. And I said, I'm not either, but I need a placeholder for now. And I think let's continue forward. And I think as we keep going, we'll figure it out. And that also became the same thing with the time shifts, because Kirsten doesn't really split the act into scenes the way another writer might.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's clear from the context of the conversation that the time has changed, or she says there's a shift in time in the stage direction.
Yeah.
But it's not like scene 2.
Right.
Which might be the case with, say, O'Neill or somebody. They would really, different writer might actually really break it up. So I was trying to figure out what we were going to do with the time changes and what we were going to do with these shifts. So we started, there was a slightly different sound for the time shifts. Mm-hmm. And I was starting my change with the time shift at the same time as that sound. But eventually what it's become is much more kind of a cut. So the shift is really fast. Like a 0 count with the sound, or a 1 count with the sound,
right? As
opposed to a 10 count, which was a sort of transformation I was doing before. So we found that a couple days into, by act 3, we're like, no, that's a cut like this. It goes, we press go at the same time. I have a 2.8 second delay, well, because Jane has a different sound, and then
right.
land with the sound. And Kimberly pointed out, or was saying, by the time we get to act 3, maybe these shifts don't have to all be the same. Maybe there's a sort of progression. And what she had said about Lavinia's shift in act 2, isn't that in act 2? How many times do I have to say this? Or is it
her first shift? That was act 3, but there's one, I'm pretty sure, earlier in act 2.
Yes.
About it being a time of it.
When we got to the act 2 one, she moves around. So then we don't have a follow spot, which is a spotlight that has a human on the other side of it who can follow them around as they're talking. So we had to cue it in a different way. And the mirror doesn't move. The mirror can move like this kind of. So you want to turn it off while it's doing those things. And they were going to keep talking. So we had to figure out kind of a way to cover those things, the moves. So sometimes what can happen is you have them lit in a different way, but you turn off the front light and they don't talk until they get to the second place, and then you turn the front light back on, which is kind of what we do with Zelda when she goes down to go sit by the tiny house. And then we ended up including the tiny house in her thing. And what Kimberly had said about Lavinia is, well, what if this was like a mirror image, or we're looking at a negative of this picture? Like, what would that be? If we're thinking of the regular light as sort of a positive, what is the negative of that? And you can't, in real life, it doesn't really work like photography that you could just swap them. You know what I mean? Like suddenly make the shadows black and the other thing white. But I thought, oh, what I could do is just, what's the darkest color I have? I have some color changing stuff. I'm just going to turn it blue and see what that does. And then we'll pull her out of that. So that's what we tried. And then we liked it. And I wasn't sure I did, actually, but Kimberly was like, no, I like it. I'm like, all right, so we'll leave it there, and then we can continue shaping things as we go. And the trick for me, I want to get a first pass as fast as possible, fast and messy, so that then we can see it more times and really carve it out. And especially if we have a 3.5 hour play or a 3 hour play. So it was 3.5 hours, and we cut 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I think if it came down last night, I saw that the bow started at 10:41. So that meant we cut another 20 minutes since we started previews.
Yeah. The intermissions are what actually makes it different lengths, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was great. That's great. So think of it. We've cut an hour out of the play.
It's wild to think about that.
It is really wild.
And I remember they were the same, thinking about those colors too. I remember during tech when you were doing Yvonne's shift, I came over and I was like, I really love this red. Like I loved, and then it sort of has become a little more pink and a little more fuchsia, and there's other layers going on. But I think the first impulse was like red, and I loved
yeah,
that.
and she also said, but Kirsten also says in the stage direction something like it starts when she's singing along with Sam Cooke. Change is going to come. She said it's like she's not, this is not a moment out of time necessarily, but she's not performing, but maybe she's sort of in a club. So then I was like, well, what is the clubbiest thing we could do? But then Kimberly really wanted it to be more purple than red.
Yeah.
So that was how it switched. But I still kept a little bit of red in the background. We have that sky panel. And we have it lit by these LED. The advantage to 2 years on is there's a lot more LED equipment, partly because the hat is closed. So we have access to equipment we wouldn't have had. So we have these strip lights that are LED that you can really program a color fade. So we can really do some color wipes across in a way that we just could never have done with regular old strip lights.
Yeah.
So
I also wanted no, yeah, it's so amazing to hear the like technology behind the things that again look like sunlight, look like an imaginary moment in their head. Like the technology behind it is super cool. And I actually did want to ask you about the sky panel, and because that's also one of the most fascinating, also scenic and lighting like collaboration. I think people also like I tend to forget too that there's so much synergy that needs to happen with all of the design elements. And I wanted to know just a little bit about your process of the sky panel, because you don't like, you see a change, but then you like look up and you don't see a change and it's a different color, and it's doing all of those things you were talking about with mood. Yeah, tell me about the sky panel.
Well, the advantage to the LED version of it is that we could get almost any color. The hard part about the LED version of those things is that you can get almost any color. So it's hard to pick something, right?
Yeah.
When we had a set of strip lights, which is a big, long, 6 or 8 foot long piece of metal equipment that has a bunch of light bulbs in it that will light something like a drop evenly. So the bulbs are spaced so that you have them next to each other so that you can get 3 circuit or 4 circuit versions. So you could have 3 or 4 different colors, but each color will cover the drop completely. So that if I wanted to light this orange wall, for example, the strip light, I could light it in a red, I could light it in a blue, I could light it in a yellow or something. And the yellow would cover the wall completely. So would the blue, so would the red, right? So initially, we had the sky panel lit from top and bottom, because also on Earth, the horizon line is always a little hotter than the top of the sky, right? So you want a little more energy, especially if there are plays that take place kind of at transitional times of day. Like there is a early morning, there's sunset all through Act 1. And I know the play is long, so I want there to be enough room to maneuver within that. This enabled us to really have color that could transform like that from one thing to the next. It's as if you're turning your hand like that, and that's going from pink to blue or whatever.
Yeah.
So It's great. So what that let me do in Act 2, at the end of Act 2, the sky goes really green. I mean, it's not quite this color, but it's almost that color.
Yeah.
It's a little bit thinner than that, less saturated. But we could just and it's a pretty long color fade, add a time jump. And so we jump to something later in the afternoon, and then the sky gets greener over 2 minutes at least. And it might be longer than that. It might be
Wow.
2-minute fades or something like that, so that the color can just change really slowly. And the control of it, and Sean, we have an excellent programmer, Sean, who is wonderful. And you could say, listen, can we, what we want to do is ombre out from the center, like in Yvonne's thing. I want it to be pink in the center and then ombre out to red over, 5 seconds or something like that. So he can set it up so it will do that,
So cool.
which is amazing. Yeah, I could not program that. I like
That's
to
so
think I
cool.
could if I were going to take the time, but I'm not gonna. So there we go.
I love all the minds working together to make that moment. And I love that green sky, because you also like feel a little sick because you know that Yvonne and Missy are about to talk. And I think even last night the audience was like, oh, when she started coming on.
Oh,
and I was
good.
like, yes. And the atmosphere totally supports that, because it's so like you feel that little like nervous stomach happening. And I think the sky does that. And then the storm comes. It's perfect.
Well, and we also have other lights that'll light the humans that can make the same change, and they're made by the same company, so the LEDs can match.
Perfect.
Because some of the problem with the technology, because we're at this like Gutenberg Bible, like printing press level invention in terms of the technology change, and there's not much consistency between manufacturers about how the LEDs work.
Mm.
So some come out a little pink, some come out a little green, some come out, but there's one company that makes them actually come out well. And so fortunately, we have the stuff that's made by those people.
Amazing.
Yeah.
My last question for you, and then we can wrap up. This has been so awesome. Is, do you have like a favorite lighting moment in the play, or a moment that you're proud of the moment that it got to, or that was challenging?
I don't know if I have a favorite moment. The play is challenging because, trying to recreate these times of day in a realistic way is actually quite hard. So I felt like I was super happy / relieved to have solved the color problem with night, so that it can actually feel like night now. I'm really happy with how the time jumps came out, and I'm really happy with how the direct addresses came out. So
Beautiful.
And mostly, thank you. And mostly I can tell if I stay relaxed during the thing. It's taken me like years to figure this out. If I'm like tense and nervous during the process, which I always used to thought it's like, oh no, everybody hates it. And then I was like, actually, I hate it.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to sort of own that.
Yeah. I love that. That's good advice.
Which
too.
to an extent is a girl thing, but
that's good advice. I'm going to take that and be like, does everyone hate it, or is it just me in my head thinking it?
Right. It is really useful. So when I'm relaxed, then I'm like, oh, I'm itchy about that moment. So I'm not happy with it yet. But
yeah,
very happy with it. Yes.
Awesome. Well, it looks amazing, and it is so great. Like the time jumps and everything with the sound, Jane's amazing sound, and Marian's set, like everything, like Sarita's costumes, all of it is so beautifully in conversation with each other. So congrats. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. It has been such a nice like a lovely, supportive, but not namby-pamby process. You know what I mean? It's been, I felt like we all really wrestled with something, but in a really positive way.
Yeah.
And there's been room for ambiguity, which has been great.
Love that. It feels like a huge accomplishment across the board. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you again soon.
I hope so. All right. I love coming to the Huntington, so thank you.